came into Rwanda, the RPF came in, you took over the government and you took over leadership after about 100 days, 3 months or so. And then you had a country, as you said earlier, that was just death. There was nothing there, just dead bodies and dogs eating those bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone that was alive was either a participant in the massacre or someone that was lucky enough to escape. How? What would you do as someone that is in charge of such a country? What was the first thing you did to rebuild the country?
Yeah, we got to find where to start from, and one of them was reorganize the forces that that had been fighting, and map out what next do we do. We at least the war is won with a huge loss. That's another issue. And then the other is what remains of people. By the way, this was accompanied in 94 at the beginning. We had nearly 3 million people who went into Eastern Congo, 3 million. And others about 600 to 800,000 into Tanzania.
Wow.
Yeah. So the whole country was emptied. Yes, and that was part of the strategy for them. It was like, if we are defeated, and then we shall empty the country so that these people, because they used to call us foreigners, that these foreigners who came in from outside, from Uganda, from Burundi, from wherever, by the time they come, they should find the country empty, meaning making it ungovernable, or even to fail to start from anywhere. So, but we did 2 things. We reorganized our own people, and were in no way hiding the fact that this was almost an impossible task to rebuild the country that starts from below the scratch and empty of people, because the refugees had, others were displaced internally. 3 million went to Eastern Congo, about 700, 800 went to Tanzania, others hundreds to Uganda, others hundreds of thousands to both Uganda and Burundi. So we had others internally displaced in their thousands. So we had now to create a sense of security to allow people, and start encouraging people not only to come back from outside, but also for those internally displaced to go back to their places, and assured them nothing is going to happen to them, which we succeeded in doing. Now, this is where it becomes even very interesting. For the millions of those who were in Eastern Congo, they were held captive by the army that fled with them, and they had all kinds of arms. They had tanks, they had artillery, and they were all positioned in the camps.
They had, so when they fled the AFDR, when they fled to Congo, they fled not only with like machine guns and machetes,
No,
they had
huge
tanks.
arms. Yeah.
And from what I know as well, the French troops, I think it's UN peacekeeping troops, they gave them a safe passage into Congo.
They did.
Right after the genocide.
From 2 points, one southwest, Rusizi area, and then from northwest to...
Because they expected, I'm assuming they expected the RPF, your group, to commit reprisal attacks and kill them.
Not only that, they might have expected that, but more so, they had wanted to find time to reorganize and attack the country again, to take over the country.
That was their plan?
That was their plan. That's how they went with arms. They went with everything, by the way. The treasury was empty, the central bank, all the money taken, everything. We were living in a place called Mugunga in eastern Congo, where even now there are refugees. But the point I'm bringing up is interesting, that is interesting for me is we kept urging them to come back and reassured them that nothing would happen to them. But those leaders, both in the army and in politics, were refusing them to come back, the millions. So what we did, and we warned them that if they don't come back, two things. We will repatriate them forcefully because we don't even want the defeated army and the militias to hold them hostage and later on use them to come back. And we did that surgically. We did it actually with the minimal. So we kept urging them. And when we went and surrounded these camps and told people, ordinary people, to move out and leave these armed groups there.
You did that, what, through radio broadcasts?
We were doing through radio broadcasts, we were using UN as well, and we were sending people who had relatives among them to go and talk to them. They went
So
and
the
talked
UN
to
was
them.
telling people that?
Yeah.
Okay.
We prepared that. So we actually now forced them back.
Okay.
And they came. Now the story here I'm driving at. Now the whole world, there was minimal loss of life in what we did, but we stood accused of having forcefully repatriated people. And the world was blaming us. For quite some days, they were all flowing, just like a river, more or less.
In the 90s?
Flowing, yeah, that was the 90s.
Okay.
And they were being accused. Now, the point I'm making here is the aid, the humanitarian industry had taken hold of things. So these camps should remain like that forever.
So the aid agencies they're meant to help people build their own life and move on from the camp is meant to be temporary.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that aid agencies had an incentive to keep that camp as is in
Forever.
perpetuity.
It becomes an industry on its own. By the way, that is what the accusation is in Eastern Congo currently. But there have been camps there even before Goma fell or before the war, because of the chaos that has been going on in Eastern Congo. Now that these people took over FCM23, and people have actually started going back home, who now entirely, the whole group has gone home, the aid agencies are accusing M23 and AFC of causing a humanitarian disaster. Because there are no longer many camps to look after. So that becomes a humanitarian disaster.
So what they're calling is a humanitarian disaster is people moving on from the camps and going home.
Yes.
But what's their incentive? So there must be a financial incentive then for them to run the camps? Because there's no other... Why else would...
Of course there are.
So saying
There is money flowing into these organizations for humanitarian activities or to run these camps. If you don't have these camps of people displaced, where even if you got the money, you say, unless you go to their homes and help them from there, which would be a noble thing. But that's not what they do. They complain that they have left camps and they are not able to feed them with all kinds of things. So that becomes a political issue. As it is now it is. But it is now, and it was then, 30 years ago, the same thing, the same complaint.
So instead of teaching people how to fish, their incentive is just to keep giving people fish, and that's how they
You'll never see
make
it
money.
anywhere.
And so essentially, because Rwanda is a country that dependent on foreign aid for a long time, I think you're one of the biggest beneficiaries. 90% of GDP in the old days was from aid. I think now
In the old
now it's
days.
about, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now it's down to like 10-15%. You guys have done really well at not depending on aid. So what you're saying is that aid is, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but aid could become a liability for a country based on what you're saying.
That is even an understatement. It is. In the long run, it is. Depends on how it is managed. And that has been a position from the beginning. We have told the people we appreciate aid. We needed it and we still need it to an extent. But we need it so that we build capacities, not to need it in the near future. That is a standard for us. That's what we say, and that's what we do.